The condition is really crazy condition.
And that shouldn't give away the whole secret to professional windsurfing.
Matteo Iachino giving Antoine Elbow a run for his money. Here we go. What a finish.
The guy is kind of talking bullshit.
The team's just got to work a little harder.
Welcome to the Windsurfing Podcast. We're back. Yes, we're back again for episode 25. And this week we have a Maui Ripper. He is the son of one of the most well-respected sail designers out there. We talk about the relationship he has with his dad. We talk about snaking and priority. We also talk about what it's like to be a pro windsurfer and how competition is progressing the sport. We also talk about the Peterway Management Board and what it's like to be on that and how perceptions and ideas change. Well, who is it? It is, of course, Graham Ezzy.
Graham, how you doing, man?
Maciek, nice to see you. I'm good. It's turning into fall here in Hamburg, so it's kind of chilly outside, but hopefully that means that we've got quite a bit of winds.
Yeah, welcome to the Central Europe life, I guess. It's the season, the wave sailing season just starts now. Basically.
Man, you guys are so hardcore. I have so much respect for the windsurfers that live in Hamburg or these other cities in Europe. It's so much more difficult than on Maui. Like on Maui, you go to the beach, it's 10 minutes away. You know it's going to be windy pretty much every day from like 12 to 5 or whatever it is, 11 to 5. And the days that are not going to be windy, you kind of know it beforehand. And so you can totally plan your life around windsurfing. Whereas in Hamburg, if you want to get on the water, and I'm sure it's the same for you with wave sailing, you have to be able to drop everything. So it's like, you know, the windsurfers here, like it doesn't matter if there's a wedding they're invited to, if it's windy, sorry, yeah. I'm going up to Denmark or whatever it is. It's such a commitment to the sport that we don't have to have in Maui. And so this is really a new experience for me, and I have so much respect for all you guys.
That's funny. That's funny to hear. But what is it with you guys? Because so many guys that grew up in these paradise places, Hawaii, Australia, I don't know, whatever, end up moving to these not very attractive places in Europe. Like I asked Craig the other time on the podcast, like, how did you end up in Munich? Like, how do you, like the Maui, you know, third generation windsurf blood, whatever, end up in Hamburg out of all places?
I know, right? That's a good question. I asked myself. I love Maui, and it's somewhere that I want to be in my life, and more in my life actually going forward. The reason that we spend so much time in Germany now is because of my wife, who's from here, and it's worked really well for us in the past because the world tour events are in the summer, and so I've been spending the summer in Europe anyway for the last however many years, and so kind of then spending May through October in Germany is felt kind of natural. Our son was born at the end of 2017, and since then we've also had more reason to be in Hamburg. So he was born here, and my wife has a lot of family here, and so it's been pretty good with him here. And we still go back to Maui as a family a couple times a year, or at least pre-COVID, that was what we were doing. Now traveling is more difficult, and who knows what life looks like. But that was the original draw to Hamburg. So like when I first started dating with my wife, like there would be a few months a year where we'd do distance, and she would be in here and I would be in Maui. And then in the summers I would be based out of Hamburg and then traveling to compete on the tour. But then when our son was born, then I started spending more time as well in Hamburg. So we're all together as a family.
Yeah. So your kid, like any plan, because the next question was about growing up in Maui. Mm-hmm. So having had that experience, would you like want to have your kid grow up in Maui as well, or do you think is a little bit of a bubble?
This is such a good question, and it's something that we talk about, and it's something I think about. Maui is amazing for growing up. There's so many aspects that are just unbeatable in terms of the ocean and the waves, and it's warm. You can play outside all the time, but the schools also kind of suck, and the like cultural stuff going on is, I don't know, not as developed as it is in Hamburg. So like, for example, here in Hamburg, like, so our kid's like 3 basically, and he goes to like a kindergarten, and it's an amazing program where he's learning and doing really well, and it's completely normal here. And versions of that exist on Maui, but it's definitely not normal. It costs a ton of money. And yeah, it's just a lot more difficult to organize and make happen. So I think there's positives and negatives to both sides.
Yeah. How do you reflect growing up on Maui for your story and I guess growing up around windsurfing as well? Was windsurfing like a very big thing in your life from the very early days?
So yes and no. So it wasn't consciously a big thing, windsurfing, in my life. So I'm going to go back a little bit and answer your first question. So like growing up in Maui as a windsurfer feels a little bit weird because windsurfing is not really respected in Hawaii for whatever reason. So like growing up as a white windsurfer, you get a lot of shit from people. It's definitely not like a cool thing to do. Maybe that's changed, and I hope it's changed. And I think, I see more kids now on Maui coming up, and it seems like it's embraced more, which is cool. Like my school that I went to did not support me at all. So like, for example, it was a nightmare to leave school to do events, even the event, like to do a Aloha Classic or one of the events at Hokipa, for example. It was so difficult to get permission to leave school. They were not supportive at all. We had to do a sport requirement every year. And I tried to do windsurfing as a sport and they wouldn't recognize it. So I had to do other sports. So it's like stuff like that is kind of frustrating. But then to get to the second part of your question, so even though windsurfing was not like this direct focus in my life until I was maybe, I don't know, 12 or something, when I was really, really getting into windsurfing, or maybe 10, I was surrounded by it. So like when I was a kid, and this is before computer cutting of sails, there was, my dad's sail loft was just right next to the house where we grew up. And there was maybe like 5 or 6 people working in there, cutting sails, making sails every day. And so like when I was like, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'd hang out in the sail loft and just talk with all the people making sails. And it was just like part of my life that was such a part of it that I wasn't even directly conscious of it. You know?
Like normal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or like going to the beach and, watching the events at Hokipa or whatever else. And so even if sometimes I don't feel totally, I mean, there's parts of Maui where I really feel at home, but there's also parts of Maui where I don't, but I do feel pretty at home in windsurfing, and I feel really blessed for that.
Yeah. You touched on something that I think we should get into, just because not many people in Europe are actually aware of that. They think of Maui as, the mecca of windsurfing or water sports, wind sports, let's say. But it isn't, like you said, windsurfing, and then there is a certain amount of localism even today, and even I don't know if you're born in Maui or
Yeah.
not, but
Yeah.
but even though you're born and raised there, just because of how you look, maybe you don't get the automatic respect or whatever. So talk us a little bit through that dynamic. Let's say, like, you go to school, your friends are, I don't know, kids of local surfers, and you get bullied, you get, I don't know, you get weird looks. Do you need to prove yourself? How does that work? Because until you go there, I don't think you realize the magnitude of that whole dynamic.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I mean, there's windsurfing is really, I don't know, in this weird state in Maui, because Hokipa is the birthplace of wave sailing. Maui is a mecca of windsurfing, but at the same time, there's a lot of local, I don't know what the right word is. I want to say like hate or misunderstanding. So there have been multiple efforts to ban windsurfing in Maui, just like ban it completely. And so anyone who's been to Maui knows about the 11 o'clock rule, which means you can't windsurf before 11 o'clock in the morning. And there's a certain area where the 11 o'clock rule applies. So Hokipa, for example, is not included in that area. You can sail before 11 at Hokipa. But that came from an effort to ban windsurfing. And that was the compromise, is that you couldn't windsurf before 11. And the rationale for banning windsurfing, it was that the windsurfers were scaring away all the fish. And so then it was a detriment to the local fishing community. And they say like food before fun. And so it's more important that people are feeding themselves than people are windsurfing.
Is there, does anybody fish in Hoki? Like, okay, Hokipa.
Yeah, there's a lot of fishing. There's a lot of fishing that goes on, whether it's spear fishing or with a line. But whether the windsurfers are having an effect on that, I don't know. I don't know. But so anyway, so that was one issue. And then when I was a kid as well, growing up windsurfing, there was huge tension between the windsurfers and the surfers, between the normal surfers. And there would be fights and it would get violent. And it was pretty gnarly. So Hokipa has like kind of a gentleman's agreement of like a 10-man rule. So if there's more than 10 surfers, then you're not allowed to windsurf. And that worked pretty well. And now, so when I was a kid, there were no lifeguards at Hokipa. And when the lifeguards came, it was maybe around 2006 or 7. I don't know. It was when I was graduating high school. And I think a lot of the windsurfers kind of complained about it because they took away like half the parking to build the largest lifeguard tower in Hawaii. And there was a bit of a sentiment that like, it's the windsurfers didn't really need to be rescued. And then also the lifeguards were not very sympathetic to the windsurfers. And so there were cases in the beginning of the lifeguards being a Hokipa where they were aggravating sort of the tension between the surfers and the windsurfers and confiscating gear from windsurfers. And if you look, like, I think there's some blog posts from I don't know, different people who are writing blogs about Hokipa at that time that tell some of these stories. But I have to say that has really changed, and the lifeguards now do a really good job. They rescue people. They're really professional and friendly, and they do a good job of helping to calm that situation rather than aggravate it. So the lifeguards help, they enforce the 10-man rule. So if there's 10 surfers, then you're not allowed to go out windsurfing. But they seem to provide, even if they're not actively doing anything, they provide a friendly presence to windsurfing. So then aggression from the other side is not, I don't know, that seems to kind of dampen it. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily that they're doing something actively, but because they're friendly and they're involved in the windsurfing community, other surfers see that, and so then they're not. It's like they have less of an excuse to cause a problem or get in fights. And I think also a lot of the guys that were getting in fights, like when I was growing up, now they're older guys and they've got kids and they've mellowed out, and so they're not looking to punch a windsurfer or something.
Yeah, and then there's the other whole thing, which I guess relates a little bit to what's going on in the US now in general, is also the Hawaiian culture and the and the legacy that the native Hawaiians have and all that. But it reached a point, probably now not anymore, where it's like, you're gonna respect us or we get violent with you, and it's
Well, so I push back a little against that. I think that the issues with the surfers, the guys that were the most aggressive and the most hostile towards windsurfers were not Hawaiian. And often they're guys coming from California, where you also have this conflict with surfers and windsurfers. And they're bringing that conflict to Maui, and they were letting out whatever other aggression they had. And I feel like, at least in the Hawaiian culture, like there's a culture of respect and mutual respect, and especially for people who are really dedicating their lives to something like
it's an amazing
the ocean or riding
sound.
waves. No, but I think it's a common misconception, like with this, because there is all this aggression on the water, and so people think, oh yeah, maybe that comes from something. And it's not just surfers versus windsurfers, but also surfers versus surfers. I mean, when you're surfing on Maui or Hawaii in general, you've got to really be on your game in the lineup. It's not that relaxing. I really enjoy surfing other places because it's just so chill. Whereas on Maui, you've always got to be kind of like looking around, puffing out your chest, and positioning yourself. It's, but to kind of complete the point about Hawaii, I mean, Hawaii has had pretty rough history, and it's something that a lot of people don't know about. And it's something that, I'm not an expert. I'm not a Hawaiian history buff, but Hawaii was an independent kingdom, and then there was a forceful overthrow of the monarchy, and then an annexation. And this was not really taught at all. And so after that happened in like the 19th century, then there was, this kind of break and this like erasure of the history. And there was a period, I think it was after the Vietnam or Korean War, where you had a lot of Hawaiian veterans. And then it kind of coincided with this like Hawaiian Renaissance and this sort of relearning of the history. And there were a lot of people who then were really torn inside because they were veterans. They'd fought for the United States, but then they learned what had happened to their people and how, about the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy and, the forceful annexation of Hawaii. And I think that was a very difficult moment for a lot of people, where you had this like identity fissure, which is even, I think, more painful in some ways than, if they didn't feel connected at all to the United States and then they learned about that history, that's one thing. But there's this like deep hurt and this deep sense of betrayal because they felt like they really did identify with the US and, committed themselves to causes like the military. So yeah, there's a complicated history, and then tied into that, there's issues with the land. There's stories about, because most of Hawaii is ag land, or most of Maui at least is ag land, agricultural land, and some of the ways that that land was taken are a little suspect. And I don't know, like so many of the troubles and traumas in other places in the world, there's not really a good solution. You know, there's just that pain and that problem, and I don't know how you solve it.
Yeah, I didn't want to sound like a dick or anything. I just need to kind of play devil's advocate sometimes.
Yeah,
too.
no, it's
Having said all that, I look the furthest from a Hawaiian person that you can possibly look like, and I never drop into onto others people waves, and like I'd rather probably pull back than have any issues surfing, because I'm not a Hawaiian level surfer, and I have surfed Honolulu Bay multiple times, which is like probably the most crowded spot in Maui.
That's crazy.
And I never had any issues. So I think they just want respect, as like just respect the rules, which
I think that's important. I think, and this is something that I think we as like the local community needs to do a good job of, is we need to promote that all the people that are coming, all the tourists, are respecting the rules, because the problems really start to come when you have guys who are showing up and they don't know about the rules. And like, for example, surfers always have the priority. And so like, for example, if I'm riding a wave, even if I've had one amazing turn and off the lip and a guy decides to paddle in, it's his wave. And so I'm going to turn off it, and I can't be angry or bummed about that. And you see tourists or even people who I'm friends with who disagree with that. They think, oh, I caught the wave first and it's my wave, I have the priority, which I think is really a misunderstanding of the situation, because on a windsurfer, we're traveling way out to sea, we've got a lot of speed. So you could have priority on every single wave or every single set wave. So there is no issue of priority. It just comes down to the surfer always has priority over the windsurfer. And I think this is like an even clearer issue than the issue, like, for example, with like stand-up paddlers or something, where they can sit on the outside and then take all the waves, which is obviously not right. Like, just because you can catch all the waves first because you're using a different craft doesn't mean that then you get priority to all of them. And so it's really important to then educate the people who are coming about those rules, to keep a healthy, happy ecosystem.
Yeah. And you gave me a great segue to something that I kind of forgot about, to be honest. Mm-hmm. But if you ask the guys on tour to ask about the guy that is most aggressive in taking waves and probably even snaking, I think two names come up. It's going to be either Ricardo or you. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, so I think localism gets a pretty bad rap unfairly. I like localism, and my rationale, my explaining of it, I think that to be anti-localism is to be elitist, because you've got these places, let's take Maui as an example, where you've got these amazing conditions and you've got people that live there that are maybe working jobs, and they get off work at whatever 5, and they've got their hour to go to the beach. But every day that they're going to the beach, there's 100 or 200 other people who are there for their vacation, and maybe those guys are only there for a week, but every week there's a new 100 or 200 people. And so this guy who's coming off work and he just wants to get a few waves on the water, he's got to deal with that every day because of how the conditions are in his home place, right? That there's so many people traveling there. And I think that it's really important to give respect to the locals, and that there's like a kind of complicated kind of hierarchical priority structure. And I think that you should give respect. And so my philosophy is that at home, at Hokipa, I'm going to kind of demand a certain amount of respect, and I'll be kind of forceful with making sure I get my waves. But then the flip side of that, so I think when I'm traveling, I want to be really deferential and really aware of the locals and making sure that I'm not at all taking all the set waves, or that I'm not being too aggressive. And so it's kind of like two sides of the same coin. So I think that, yeah, your home break, I think, in your home spot, you should have respect, have a little bit more priority. And then when you're traveling, it's really important to respect the locals.
Okay, so you're not gonna take my waves when you come to 50 cm Mashi, Poland.
Nope.
But if
You
I
can have
catch a
all the
wave,
sets.
if I catch a wave 5 kilometers out the back in Hokipa, you can just stack on it and go. Is that
No,
what you're
I mean,
saying?
I think that people also don't totally understand priority issues. Like if you watch at Hokipa and you see like, oh, these like few guys are getting all the waves, it's maybe Levi, it's maybe me, it's maybe Morgan, it's maybe Brasinho. But if you actually watch, we're all going a mile out to sea. We're going way farther out than anyone else. And so like often I'll have even conversations with Levi or Morgan or whoever, where we're sitting way out the back, 500 meters farther outside than anyone else. Because that is where you have to then catch the waves, and then you have the priority. And then you get people that, I don't know, think that because they're upwind, they have priority or something. And I think one of the things with priority is that it's different in every spot. And so it's important to ask what the priority issues are, like, is it a rotation system? Is it, whoever's closer to the peak? Yeah, at Hokipa, it's whoever's on the wave first.
I think that's every place in the world. I've never seen.
No, so like in I think you'd have to ask some of the Aussie guys, but I think in some of those spots they do like a rotation. So like you get out back and you like wait in line, and then it's like this person gets it, the next person, and then once you ride your wave, you come out back and you get in line again, which I think is a good fair system.
Yeah, but
so
that
like
works. That
rotation.
works if you have 10 guys with the same level. It will never work if one guy is bobbling out the back for 20 minutes while.
But anyway, that's the system there, and so it's just a different system. In Pozo, for example, the locals, there's like a peak, not the main peak on the bunker, but the second peak coming in, and at least how it's been explained to me by some of the locals, like Dario or Daida or whoever, it's whoever is first on that peak. So like sometimes you can be riding the bunker and then coming upwind, and then they'll have jibed on that peak, and they'll be bottom turning straight into you. And Pozo priority, it's their wave, and that's something that you just have to respect.
Sounds like something a local would tell you after he burns you. Just
yeah, but if you watch in Pozo, you'll see that there's one peak where you've got Dario, Daida, Moritz, all the guys are just setting up in the one peak, and it's not the main peak on the bunker. It's this the like second peak that's coming in, and yeah, that's how it works there. And so the point is that every place has their own priority system. And so to bring it back to Maui, to your question, yeah, I think I get a lot of waves at Hokipa, but I think that's because I'm going out to sea more and knowing where and how to catch them. And there's an element of kind of testing, I think, like when you have, and I'm not the only one who does this, everyone does this, from Levi to Robbie Nash, to anyone. Like if there's a new face, you don't know if they're going to ride the wave. And so like often, maybe if they're on a good wave, you set up upwind of them and you'll just kind of see, because there's a lot of people that, they want to sail Hokipa, but they don't necessarily have the level to ride the waves. And so then they'll kick out of the wave before it starts to break, or,
yeah,
or
just to end this subject, and I'm not going to let you answer this. It is 99%, just to educate the people a little bit, 99% of the places, it's whoever is the furthest out back. And I don't want to hear that there's some
Well,
whatever.
I think you have to ask. I think this goes back just to end the segment in a circle. I think it's so important to talk to the locals, which this is also the solution. Like people get angry about angry locals. The way to make locals not angry is to talk to them, say hi, smile at them, ask them about the rules of the place. And I think it's when you're traveling for windsurfing or surfing or anything that you're doing, it's so important to do, and it makes such a difference. You'll have a happier time. People will be nicer to you. Talk to the locals. Be nice, be friendly, ask them what's up.
Okay, moving on. As I mentioned kind of at the beginning, I guess you're maybe not you personally, but you're part of that kind of third generation of Hawaiian windsurfers. And it seems like guys around your age or maybe slightly younger, like, I don't know, Zane Schweitzer or even Kai or Connor Baxter and whatever, not many of them actually stayed in the sport. Do you think it's just a function of the fact that the sport was sort of going down at the time, or is there other things going on there? And you stayed, so yeah.
I don't know. I'm a purist. I love windsurfing. So I'm not easily distracted if there's a new sport that comes up, like stand up paddle or winging or something else. I mean, those are cool, but I'm a windsurfer, and it's what I'm passionate about. And so I'm not looking to get into whatever new hot thing there is. I don't know. I think we're the same age. Are you 89?
No, I'm 91. End of
91,
91, so I claim like I'm still 28, I mean, I am still 28. So.
Because like when I was coming up, there were not that many people my age, but then I don't know, suddenly there were, and there's kind of a whole generation of people who are my age, like Jagger and Brazinho and Mateo, and all of us are Camille, all of us are kind of the same age.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So I guess you didn't really think about it that way. Okay. Give me your typical day in Maui when you're 15, 16. How does it look like?
So I would go to school, and like in the US, which shocks most Europeans, you can drive when you're 16. So I'd probably drive myself to school, and I didn't have my own car, but I'd drive my dad's truck. So I'd drive myself to school, and then school would go till 3. And then I'd go pick up my dad, and then we go to Hokipa and go windsurfing. And then I'd go home, and then I'd do homework, and I'd wake up and do it again. And it was a pretty intense time. So I was windsurfing as much as I could. And then school was really intense. And I put a lot of effort into school. School was really important for me. So I didn't really have much of a social life. I didn't really have many friends at that time. I was either windsurfing, or I was at school, or I was doing homework.
Yeah. Anders described life in Maui as Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Do you feel like if you stayed there, if you haven't gone on tour, you would maybe burn out with that kind of, school windsurf or work windsurf, work windsurf, work windsurf? It's amazing to me to see that a lot of people have been at it like this for, 30, 40 years, kind of Groundhog Day.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've always had this kind of duality to myself where I felt like I needed something more than Maui, even something more than windsurfing, which is why, I took the time off to go to university, and I went to a university that's not anywhere near good windsurfing. And so there's these other aspects that I need. And I like, for example, being in a city. I like this contrast now. I'm in Hamburg, which is one of the big cities in Germany, and I like having that contrast to Maui. So I don't know. I think I might not be able to handle, 10 years straight on Maui.
Yeah. You mentioned college. You obviously went to Princeton, which is very much a top American university, isn't it? And my question is like, you get to the end of high school and like you say, you put in the work, seems like you're going to be able to get into some good schools, but at the same time, you have the level to try to go on tour or try to make a career out of windsurfing. How does that decision process? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I wanted to go to university, but windsurfing was also very important to me, and I'd been competing, doing World Cups, kind of the whole time. I did my first World Cup when I was 14, but because of school, I could never really do the full tour. So I do what events I could. But basically, like I decided, like either I'm going to go to one of the top schools or I'm going to go on the tour full time. So I'm going to apply, and if I don't get in, I'm just going to go into windsurfing full time. And it's so difficult. It's crazy. The American college admission system is insane. And so these schools have like, I don't know, something like 5-6% of the people who apply get in. It's crazy. And so I'm just going to apply to, I think, Princeton, Harvard, Columbia. I did a few schools on the West Coast, like to have as a safety school, like UC Berkeley or USC, but I don't know if I would have gone to them. And then, yeah, it was a stressful time waiting for the college admissions, but then I didn't get any rejections, and Princeton seemed to kind of fit me the best. It was, yeah, I mean, it was ranked number 1 at the time for American universities for undergrad, but that wasn't the reason I went. I thought that whatever the kind of the ethos that the literature about the place projected was something I wanted, something I identified with. And so I never went to visit. I had never been to the East Coast of the US before, but yeah, I went and I loved it. It was a good experience.
Is it anything like the American college movies?
To some extent,
like fraternities and all these frat houses and parties and it's weird. Obviously, Princeton is not, it's not UCLA, or it's not this kind of, well, you would maybe.
It's not a big party school, so like the social scene is a little bit closer to what you would see in like The Social Network, which is about Harvard. It's not about Princeton, but you have like these clubs. Like Princeton, you have eating clubs. There are fraternities, but it's not really, anyway, they're not really a big deal. But then also at the same time, the academics are really difficult. And so the classes are hard. And so there's not that much of that like American party college experience. I mean, there still is a lot of social life, but it's a different thing. Everyone lives on campus, which is different than the European school. So you really get to know people. That's a very social community because you're all living together.
Yeah. So then you finish that American literature. Yeah. Am I correct?
Just literature. So not focused on American. So
yeah.
I did more focus on poetry.
I have no idea what kind of career you can pursue after that, but obviously there is a career you can pursue. So then another 180 degree turn, and you're like, okay, now from being, having a degree in literature, I'm going to become a windsurfer. It doesn't really go any further.
I always knew that I wanted to go back to windsurfing. So I wanted to go back to being a pro windsurfer. And I was still doing some World Cups, and I was still trying to train as much as I could. So I had with the way the school system was set up, maybe like 4 months out of the year where I could still windsurf full time. And it was kind of crazy. It felt like I was juggling. And if I had to go one more day, all the balls would have fallen down. So like when I completed my thesis and finished my senior year, it was pretty stressful, but then I was pretty happy to go back to windsurfing. And there was a moment maybe a year after that where I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in windsurfing. I mean, the kind of weird thing with with American universities, which again is a little bit different than in Europe, is first of all, they're all liberal arts education. So it means you have to take classes from a lot of different subjects. So math, science, history, whatever it is that you're studying. And I actually did a late switch to literature. So I started doing economics. And so I was really into econ and math. But I found that I was spending more time writing. And I was taking these creative writing seminars, and I realized that that was more important to me. And so I switched quite late, actually. I switched in my beginning of my third year. But that's possible because of the liberal arts system, and I had enough credits to make it work. But then in terms of like a job or something, so with the elite universities, so like Princeton or Harvard or whatever, it doesn't matter what you study. You can kind of get not any job, but there's like a few high paying jobs that like 60 or 70% of the graduating kids go into. And so it's like investment banking, management consulting, and they're high paying jobs, and they don't care what you study. They just want to see that you went to one of the, Princeton or Harvard or MIT or whatever it is. And because all my friends, all the people I knew were going into jobs like that, and they were living in New York City and making a lot of money as 21-year-olds. And I was a little bit seduced by that. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And so actually I applied for some jobs. I applied for some finance jobs. And I remember this moment where I had this interview somewhere in like Midtown Manhattan for this firm that did like options and futures trading. And the interview was going well. And the guy was like, yeah, like in this career, like in 20 years, you be sitting where I am, and you're making, millions a year. And I just remember thinking like 20 years, I'm going to be in my 40s and I'll have been in this office for 20 years. And I had like a cold sweat. I was like, oh my God, no. Like suddenly the reality of that life set in. And I was like, I don't care if I'm making no money. Like, this is not what I want. I do not want to be sitting in a building in Midtown Manhattan for 20 years. And so then I gave up on that, and I was like, fuck it, I'm going fully back into windsurfing.
Yeah. And was it always the tour and always the World Cup? Like always, it's obviously the best way to evaluate talent and the best way to challenge yourself against the best guys. But
yeah,
you are kind of like a creative guy, and you kind of embrace filming and whatever. And, yeah, seems like.
So there was a period where I wasn't competing on the world tour or in any competitions, and I was focusing on making films. And so I did a bunch of films with Umi, which is my friend Brendan from the UK, and we did a lot of amazing trips and making films. And then I did a lot with Kevin Pritchard as well, and that was an amazing experience of traveling to these places and making these windsurfing films. And I really learned a lot from that, and I really loved doing it. And I felt so I've got this like such a complicated relationship with competitions and with the world tour. So on one hand, it's complicated with the world tour because, coming from Maui, the world tour is not at all what we sail in, right? Like Maui is starboard tack, big waves, light wind, and the world tour is a lot of port tack, small waves, a lot of strong wind. This is totally different windsurfing. And it's something where I've felt obligated to commit myself to, so since I was 15, from like, I don't know, period from like 15 to 22 or something, I spent all my summers in the Canary Islands trying to learn that stuff. And I enjoy sailing in it. And I like sailing in Pozo, and I like port tack and whatever else, but it's still not what I'm good at. And it's not my I don't know what really inspires me about windsurfing. Yeah. But at the same time, I felt like it was important to make that commitment and make that challenge to to go on the tour. But then my relationship with competitions has also been complicated. And windsurfing is a sport like surfing or skateboarding, these other sports, where it can exist outside of competition, right? Like tennis only exists within the framework of competition. Whereas windsurfing, you have these other faces to it, and other.
Not that many though these days, right? I wish there was a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I don't know. So, but it's complicated because you've got this whole like freedom and expression and all this side, and then to like further complicate it, like my competition experiences have been really up and down. Like there are times where I felt like I'm really competing well and doing well in the heats, and then other times where the mental side or whatever it is really hurts me and stops me from doing well. And like my first event, I remember I was 14, so the PWA came back to Maui. There was a few years break. This was in 2004, and came back to Maui. There was a trials for the event. I did the trials, but I didn't make it into the event. But I passed, I think, a heat or two or something in the trials, but I didn't make it in. So I'm at school the next day, and then my dad comes and picks me up, and it turns out that Dunkerbeck didn't show up at the inscription. And so there was one spot left, and I was the next person in line to get that spot. So my dad comes, picks me up. I get out of school, go down to the beach, 14, never really competed before. And I was up against Jonas Ceballos, who was ranked second in the world at the time. So I think I was like the lowest seed of the event, and I was up against Jonas. And it was kind of like classic Hokipa, like logo high, mass high sets. And yeah, I beat him. And I was just like sailing pretty solid, just doing what I know how to do. And
which is not that easy. I just to chime in a little bit, like Jonas, you think of a port tack jumper, but I've seen him in Cabo Verde. He freaking rips.
Yeah, Jonas is a good sailor. And so I had some amazing waves, and throughout that whole event, and at that time there was jumping counting as well at Hokipa for some of the heats. And that's what really held me back, because my jumping wasn't very good then. Like my back loops were not that consistent, and it was before I knew how to do push loops. So like I had really good wave scores, and so I passed some heats, and I really was pushing myself, and I was really sailing well in the heats. And I thought, wow, like I really like competing. This is a cool thing. It's something that I look forward to doing more of. But then as I did more, I had more and more issues where, I'd end up in a heat and everything would go wrong, or, I would psych myself out or think I needed to change my gear in the middle of the heat. And it took me a long time then, maybe from that point on, maybe 12 years or something, to really come up with a good strategy for competing. Yeah, mindset. That's the right way to say it. Yeah.
Well, join the club.
Yeah.
Took me about the same.
And I'm still working on it, but I feel at least now I have like kind of a foundation that I can work on.
Yeah. Do you feel like competing in wave sailing is a little bit like fitting, how you say, a square peg in a round hole? Or do you feel like maybe the person that is world champion is the best wave sailor on the planet? Because I know that in Hawaii, that's probably not the most popular opinion.
Yeah, I think that, I think that competition is an important part of sport in general, and it's something that I'm interested in, but I also don't think it should be all encompassing. So it's not totally defining. And then there are things that are really cool and admirable in windsurfing that don't need to fit into competition. So like, I don't know, people talk about like progression in wave sailing, and like, oh, maybe he lands like the most amazing move ever, but it's super wet, or then he kind of crashes at the end, but we want to reward progression. And so that should get a high score. And other people say, well, but it's not really completed. Should it get a score? And I think like that's amazing, and progression is amazing, but maybe it doesn't fit within the parameters of competition. And that is up to, the tour and the riders to define what those parameters are. And then within those parameters, I think competition is really interesting. It's exciting. It's good for the sport. It's good for the spectators. It's something that, like, as an athlete, is nice to have in our lives, that we can then kind of like push ourselves for. And it kind of sets like a purpose. But that said, I think that there's all these other aspects of wave riding that don't fit into competition, and they don't need to. And I think that winning a world title is a huge accomplishment, and it's not easy at all. And the guys that are winning titles have dedicated their lives to working for a world title. And whether it's Philip or Brasinho or Thomas or Victor, they train for winning a world title. They eat, sleep, windsurf for winning a world title. It's like their whole life is around that. And that dedication, I think, is really admirable. And then like the talent behind it as well. So I have a lot of respect for anyone that wins the world title. Are they the best wave sailor in the world? I would maybe argue with that question, because there's so many different kinds of wave sailing, right? From Hokipa to Pozo to Silt to whatever. And on any given day in any given spot, there's going to be someone who's the best. But it's overall, there's wave riding, then there's jumping. It's like, we're talking about, like, I don't know, so many different aspects when we're talking about wave sailing. So what does it mean to be the best? And then how do you even define the best? Like, on any given day at Hokipa, there's maybe 3 or 4 really standout sailors, but it's not that you would necessarily say that one is totally better than the other, because they're just riding the waves differently. They've got a different approach, and they're all doing really well. And if you were then marking score sheets and you're saying, oh, well, he got 4 turns instead of 3 turns, so he's going to win the heat. But does that mean he's a better windsurfer? I don't know if it does. But so I don't really like to think in those terms of like who's the best or who's whatever. I think competition is interesting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that because whoever wins the world title that they're the best in the world, or whoever wins at Hokipa, they're the best at Hokipa or whatever. It's like for me, it's like a standalone event.
Yeah. But on progression, it's funny if you imagine that Pozo wouldn't be like a major event, then I don't think a lot of the progression of jumping would happen the way it has happened now, where, like, from what I understand, I haven't even tried, but like push forwards are really painful to land them.
Yeah, they hurt.
Whatever. And I'm not sure if you guys would put yourself through so much pain if it wasn't for knowing that it would help you win a heat and maybe reach a world title. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
but do you know where the first push forward was landed?
I think in Maui, right? Kauli.
Yeah.
Kauli, or at least the first filmed one. The one with the red boxer sail that he almost lands on top of Jace, I think, in the water.
Yeah, I don't know if that was actually the first one he ever did. But the point is that he was learning them on Maui. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good point. And then it makes me think, like, the flip side of that is, if we had more down the line events, where would the level of down the line windsurfing be? And that's a pretty interesting thought.
Yeah, I think a lot higher, I think we'd be seeing double air takas and things like this maybe being landed in heats. Now nobody even tries, because there's already so much more you can do to win a heat. So many things. But yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I don't know if you're maybe the best person to ask that or not. You're probably going to give me an answer. But Josh Angulo touched on this, that when you grow up in Hawaii, ride Hokipa every day, there's this kind of almost holy atmosphere that this is the place. And being there, I also got that atmosphere, like you really want to be good there and whatever. But as you say, it completely doesn't translate to what you get on tour. but being there, you get a sort of confidence or thing like, okay, you know, I'm from Hawaii. This is the, you know, the Mecca. This is, you know, and Josh touched on that Josh Angulo touched on that he went to Pozo and he was like full of confidence / arrogance. And then it's like such a humbling experience. You know, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I will never forget my first day in Pozo. I came with so much confidence and I thought, oh yeah, this looks fun. And I ended up like in my first few runs coming in on the rocks at the bunker because I rode the wave too far in, and I walking back with sea urchin in my feet. And I was like, oh, this sucks. I suck at this. This sucks. I hate this. But I came to really enjoy sailing there, and I've spent a lot of time there. I think that for me, it's been really important to do the tour and to do these other events and to push myself to sail in Europe, to make myself well-rounded and also to kind of humble myself. I mean, there are guys from Maui who make a career just out of Maui windsurfing. You know, Levi competed for a long time, but the latter part of his career, you know, it's just been Maui. And you've got guys like Bant Roediger who have, you know, made a career just out of Maui. I know he did the IWT competitions, but you know, he never really ventured to do the PWA stuff. And I have a lot of respect for all those guys, but it's something that I felt personally was important for me. Even if I could make a career without doing the PWA, I felt like it was an important challenge for myself, and also kind of a sign of respect, like giving respect to the windsurfing world and everyone else, to not, like, you know, throw my nose up at these other conditions. I mean, they're all, even if, you know, Pozo or Cabezo doesn't get me as excited as Hokipa does, I still have a lot of respect for those places and the people that sail there. And it's not something that I want to, look down upon. I think on Maui, it can be pretty easy to think, oh, yeah, this is what windsurfing is. And this is the best, and whoever's the best here is the best in the world. But I really don't want to discredit anyone else's windsurfing experience. And that's been an important motivation for me in doing the tour and committing to the tour and, you know, sailing around Europe and all of that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So then just from doing the tour, you move kind of into a different role as well, with being on the PWA management board. Tell us, what was your motivation? And tell the people, because I know that, but how does the process of getting elected to that work?
Yeah, so I joined like 5 years ago now, maybe, to the PWA. I'm not really sure. Something like 5 years ago, to the management board. So the PWA is a riders organization, which means that you've got the riders giving a lot of say about how the organization is run. And so you've got a management board that's 7 people. So it's 3 riders, 3 industry members, and then 1 elected chairman. And then that board votes and decides on the direction that the tour is going. And then that informs the tour manager on how to manage the tour. And the tour manager is Rich Page. So I didn't have much intention of being part of the organization of the tour at all, but I was a pretty vocal critic of certain parts of the tour, about all kinds of different things, from sponsorship to judging to how things were being run. And I got tired of complaining, and I felt like, you know, I need to step up and do something rather than just complaining all the time about these things. And so I stood for election in Silt, and I guess I kind of had a persuasive speech, or at least people could tell that I was motivated to try to make some changes, and I was elected onto the board. And that first year on the board, it was really kind of eye-opening in a lot of ways. So I think I did make some changes that I'm proud of and have made a difference. Like, I think I really made it a lot more transparent. Like, before I was on the board, there was this like secrecy. And so this like, I don't know why, but like the sailors were really kept out of the loop about what the discussions were, and they weren't really consulted. Like, I remember trying to get information about things and being told like, no, this is for the board to know only. And I felt like that's totally wrong. Like, we need to be fully transparent about what we're doing. And so I really tried to involve the sailors more and to inform them. And I hope I did a good job of that with the slalom. I know, like with the wave sailing, it's a lot easier because that's what I'm doing. So it's a lot easier to kind of tell all the wave guys what's happening and what's going on. And I set up like a Facebook group for the wave sailors and all these kind of things just to help with the transparency. But then about making actual changes and big changes into how things are run, that first year was really eye-opening because I learned that, you know, a lot of the things are the way they are because that's the best way that they can be, because we're so limited by budget, by personnel, by whatever factors. And so it's actually not that easy to make some of these big changes that the riders want to see in terms of whatever getting.
Yeah, we need more down the line events. That's probably the like, and yeah, and probably you were saying that before you reached the board, and then you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, it's actually really hard to put on an event and to make an event happen. It's a lot of work, and the way that the tour is set up is we rely on local organizers. So the PWA doesn't actually make any events, with some exceptions. The PWA is a bit involved in Maui, but or is pretty involved in Maui, but more or less the PWA is not structured, not set up to do any organization. So it means that we rely on local organizers wherever they are to come to the PWA and say, I want to put on an event. And we say, great, here's what you need. You need to have these standards. You need to provide this much prize money. You need to have this, this, and this, and this. And then the PWA shows up and runs the event. You know, the PWA has the judges, they have some of the press people, they have the photographer, and they know they have the riders, obviously, they have the structure. But in terms of actually organizing the event, getting permits, getting money, getting all of the stuff that you need to make an event, that's the job of the local organizer. And so that means that we need someone in each of these places to do the organization. And yeah, it's difficult. Not only is it difficult to find those people, but it's also difficult for them to raise the money to put on an event, and then not just raise the money to put on the event, but to make a bit of money themselves to make it sustainable so that they want to keep doing it.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? I mean, yeah. And you, once you hit that wall a few times, that's why I think every now and then the people on the management board should change, because initially you have that energy, right? You have a lot of that energy. It's like, I'm going to fucking change the world, you know? And then you hit a wall here and there and you're like, yeah, this might be hard or whatever. But I think it's I think we have to just humble ourselves and realize that small steps, that a lot of small steps will accumulate, that we can't take a massive leap, you know?
I think so.
Not set up that way. So
I think on the waves, like we came up with, and this was something I was really involved with, we came up with a structure for lower level events. So that was the whole like star system of events. And I saw that like people were complaining about it online, that it was really complicated, having these like 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 5-star, 6-star events. That's how all the tours work.
Well, it's also tour, WTA, WSL.
It's what people didn't realize, and and it's the reason for this whole thing, is it's a way to get more events. So it's a way that then we can have more down the line events, because right now, like we can't really do a down the line event for, we say like 15,000 prize money, because it's just not equal with then like an event like, I don't know, in the Canaries, Pozo, where you've got like 70,000 euro purse prize money, and so you have to kind of have have a system where then you can allow for these like lower level events to have more events, then hope that those events can grow over time. And I had a lot of discussion with Simeon, who runs the IWT tour, about trying to kind of integrate the tours, which I think would be really, really good for the sport, is to have some of their events that hit certain standards to count towards PWA points. Those talks, I guess, are still ongoing. He's got his vision for what the IWT is, and it doesn't always align with what standards the PWA is looking for. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, not moving on, but it's kind of more of the same, saying like, competition is probably the best way to quantify a rider's position, and is a start to actually, I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't on the PWA. I wouldn't be doing this podcast, so that gave me the opportunity, etc., etc. But in Robbie Nash's words, in the King's words, the most important for him when he looks for a rider is how much stoke a person shares. You know what I mean? How much that person kind of promotes windsurfing and gets people on the water, but in a way that, is positive and, connecting people with the ocean and whatever. How do you see yourself in that? Because to me, it seems like your goals are a little bit different than this year. I want to be top 5,
People who are too positive make me really uncomfortable. I can't tell if it's fake or if it's real. And it's an
American thing, though. Americans are like this, super positive.
Yeah, that's true.
Small talk, Hey, I love your shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. With the current tour, I'm not competing to be world champion. And I know kind of what it would take for me to be in that fight. I'd have to really spend more time in the Canaries. I'd have to really work on my port-tack jumping. And it's not something that I want to do. If the tour changed, if we had more starboard tack events or more down the line events, then I think I would start looking more at an overall position. But instead, I think for me, it's kind of about testing my own limits. So like I finished, I think I was 15th in the world last year, which is not amazing, but it's also not bad. And like kind of what I would like to do is to show, okay, I can sail in these conditions. I can challenge my mind trying to figure out this competition thing. And then I can do something really different and hopefully special in Hokipa or wherever else I'm sailing. And that's really what gets me excited. Like I've been working on some kind of, I don't want to say different ways of riding waves, because it's still just riding waves, but, like been really refining my approach to how I'm riding waves and focusing on some pretty subtle things with flow and speed. And, these are not things that matter in the competitions really, but that's what gets me most excited. And so it's a kind of this like multifaceted approach where I like training for the events, and I still train for them, even if if I'm not totally committed to getting my port-tack doubles down. I go to the Canaries to train, or go to Cape Town or whatever, and put in the time in the gym and with the nutrition and everything else to be ready to compete. And that's an important part of the process. And then kind of just showing that I can show up in these places. But then really where I'm trying to push the sport or progress in the sport is more in certain ways of riding waves. Like I'm really interested in riding waves, and it doesn't have to be Hokipa, like it can also be up in Denmark with port-tack wind and North Sea waves. But I don't know. I think there's like different aspects of the sport that like, because there's so much jumping focus, we haven't been focusing on the waves, like kind of like you hinted at. And I think there's like a certain amount of like rail work that really isn't developed in the sport. You know, like I feel like there's a kind of a misunderstanding about turns, or where, you know, there's a lot of these just like tail blow cutbacks, and like those get like a high scores and good respect. Whereas I really want to see, and what I'm trying to do is like real like rail riding, surfing, and then approaching waves, where I'm really looking at it not as like a skate park where I'm doing like, oh, I'm doing a trick there, I'm doing a thing there, but really as like a kind of a dance where I'm like trying to really flow with the wave. And I'm like, okay, I want to start at one point, end at another point, and I don't want to slow down, or not, I don't want to slow down, but I want to have one constant flowy movement the whole time. And I want to make as many connections with the wave as I can. And so stuff like this that gets me really excited and motivated with, when it comes to windsurfing.
Like a Craig Anderson approach or something.
Yeah, just different. I think in windsurfing, there's just so much that we can do to you know, explore wave riding. There's so many different styles of wave riding, you know, from Policao to Angulo to Levi to Pritchard to Cowley to Brasinho. Like they're all pretty different from each other. And it's just cool to work in that space.
Yeah. Let's talk sales.
Tell me.
Obviously you've been involved from day zero, not even from day one of your life with Ezzy. Would you know Ezzy's are the most different sails? Definitely, like if you take all the 4-button wave sails from all the brands, Ezzy will feel the most different out of all of them. Some people like it, some people don't. For some people, it's like a religion. Some people hate him, whatever. But my question is, do you and would you feel comfortable from a performance standpoint riding something different?
So at least in the last few years, I've been pretty involved in the sail testing and design. So I'd say the sails are pretty close to what I want to be riding. So I wouldn't, I mean, they are what I want to be riding. You know, I wouldn't be working to develop something that I don't want to ride myself. So I think I wouldn't be into riding something that's different. In terms of the different feeling, I'm not sure that they actually feel so different. They're constructed entirely differently, and the way that the shape is done is completely different than other sails, because they have a lot more broad seaming, and so they get a lot of their shape from the broad seaming rather than the luff curve, which is why they look so deep, why they look so different. It's just a different way of getting the shape into the sail.
Yeah, but they're also they're historically more high aspect. The materials, the materials are different.
Yeah, definitely. So it's like, and I think compared to some sails, they feel super different. But there's others that I've tried that are not that. I mean, not that they feel the same, but it's not a different world of feeling. But yeah, it's something that, you know, so if you're trying to make a wave sail, a perfect wave sail, you've got at least like different aspects of it, right? You've got the weight, you've got the durability, you've got the early planing, you've got the maneuverability. You've got all these different aspects that then you're trying to maximize and find. Some of them are trade-offs with each other. And so you're trying to find the best balance. And so I think the sails have always been really durable, which is important, not just because then they last longer, but because if you're wave sailing in heavy spots, you want to be able to trust that you can wipe out and that your gear is not going to fall apart. So it's an important aspect for wave sailing. But then I think in the past, then the sails were really heavy because of that. and they had that reputation for being bomb-proof but heavy. And then in the last few years, it's something that we've really worked on, and because obviously lightness and maneuverability is really important for me and what I'm doing. So like, okay, how do we make the sails lighter but still keep them strong? And then that comes down to like materials, and you can get materials that are strong and light, and you're trying to maximize the best materials. And then with the construction, maybe there's some ways where you can construct the sail that it has the same strength but it's lighter. And so working on all these different aspects. And so it's kind of a never ending process, because okay, yeah, you make the sails lighter, all right, now let's look at how do we make it more maneuverable, and then okay, how do we make it more early planing, how do we make it like, so you've got all these different aspects that you're trying to work on.
Yeah.
And
so a lot of times it's a trade-off. This is what people don't understand. Like, they're going to be focused on one thing, like, oh, this sail is so light. Yeah, but like, it's not gonna, it's like there's trade-offs, definitely. Of course, there's better and worse gear out there, but there's also trade-offs, definitely. Is your last name an asset, or does it carry a burden through the last 30 years of your life?
So I think that overwhelmingly I'm incredibly lucky, and it's an asset. I think when I was younger, it was pretty difficult for me because I felt like I was in the shadow of my name. I remember going to an event in Japan when I was, I don't know how old, 18 or something, and someone introduced me as Graham, whatever, and there was like no reaction, and then son of David Ezzy, and then and like then that was the only like reference point that I existed with respect, like that's how people could reference me. And so I felt like I was in the shadow of my name, and also in other aspects of my career or life, where I was, I didn't have really any independence from that, because everyone in windsurfing knows my dad, and my dad has been there since the beginning of wave sailing. And so I come with that baggage. But then at the same time, like on the positives, I am continuing that legacy, and it's something that I get to be a part of. Like, I feel so lucky, growing up at Hokipa, and because not just growing up at Hokipa, but because my dad, was one of the first Hokipa windsurfers, and so he's been a part of that community, so aside from the sail business, just part of the like Hokipa windsurfing community for the last, I don't know how many decades. And so it meant that I was able to be kind of friends with all these people who were my heroes, because they knew my dad. And so it was like a kind of a step removed. So whether it was like Levi or Polika or whoever else, like they were all really friendly to me. And it's something that, I'm incredibly grateful for. That was an amazing experience to have. And then now, like as I'm older, I have a lot of respect for my dad's history in the sport, and I want to try to continue on that legacy, whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's with the sails or just with the windsurfing itself. Because, before anything else, before being a sail designer, he's just a really passionate windsurfer. He still windsurfs every single day. I mean, now he's doing more foiling than wave sailing, but he's just an incredibly passionate windsurfer, and he's really interested in board development and equipment development. He was the first asymmetric windsurfing waveboard was made for him. He was like really in the, into gear and very technical, and he just loves the sport and loves windsurfing. And so to carry on that legacy, I think is something that I can be pretty proud of.
Does that involve taking over Ezzy Sails one day?
I don't know. So, I mean, at the moment, I'm a sponsored rider, and I work for the brand, and I work with my dad, and I also do other things. And if I were to get more involved in the business and to take over, that's would be something interesting, but that would be something for the future. It's not right now.
Yeah, must be funny sometimes to have your dad as a boss.
Yeah,
You did
not so
shit.
funny.
Yeah, you didn't do so well in that contest, did you? Rider, not son.
Yeah,
rider.
I think it can be hard. I was talking to other friends with who work with their parents, and
yeah,
it's hard because there's so much emotion and other stuff going on.
Yeah.
So
how much do you get this? Like, you travel somewhere. Let's say you go up to Denmark tomorrow for this forecast, and a guy comes up to you. Oh, you're Graham Ezzy. Hey, look, there's a ding in my sail, and this shouldn't be like that. And like straight into just sail talk, just because, you know, you're an Ezzy, and nobody, like, you don't want to, like, probably you want to go out and sail, but the guy is just gonna destroy you for an hour about his ideas about sails.
Yeah, no, it's not so bad. That doesn't really happen. I'm more the one keen to talk to people, asking if they're getting on with the sail, if they're having issues with the rigging, and yeah, it's something that, if my dad has kind of instilled in me, kind of like a team rider work ethic, you know, making sure that I'm doing my job every time I'm at the beach, and making sure that, you know, people are rigging their sails right and setting up their boards, you know, and
Yeah,
if they've got a taboo board, I'm always happy to answer questions on it. Or, you know, now a lot of people are using the K4 fins, and so I get a lot of questions about the fins, because the fins are pretty complicated. Like, rigging a sail is kind of straightforward, but with the fins, you've got so many options now.
I think the level of education on that is just missing. Like, you know, a bunch of videos or whatever. Like, the other day I was explaining, a guy asked me on the beach, and before I finished telling him how far apart his quads should be and whatever, there was like 10 people around, because that info is just not out there, you know. So
yeah, interesting.
So yeah, just to kind of wrap it up on a real Graham Ezzy note, you're good with words and maybe an aspiring writer as well. Give me a 50 to 100 word essay. What does windsurfing mean to you?
Okay, I'd preface this just by saying that I feel like writing is revision, and so yeah, I do consider myself a writer, but that's different than
And freestyle writing.
Yeah, freestyle performance. But what does windsurfing mean to me? Windsurfing is wave sailing, is traveling forever, but staying in one place. Like, if you actually look at it, we're just going in circles up there. We're not going anywhere, but yet at the same time, it's this incredible journey, emotional journey with physical risk and this connection with this force that is so much greater than ourselves. You know, I'm not a religious person, but I have a certain spirituality or faith just in my relationship with the ocean, because it's this force that is so powerful and so much greater than any of us and any one individual. And to be a windsurfer is to be able to dance with this amazing otherworldly force, this unknowable power. And I think there's something really, really special in that kind of goes down to the core of what it means to be alive.
Now I really want to fucking go windsurfing.
Yeah.
and we should definitely end it here, but we have this little section of well, they were supposed to be quick fire questions, but they're like slow fire questions.
Okay.
So what are your pet peeves?
Pet peeves: when people don't use the Oxford comma, when
The fuck is the Oxford comma?
It's the comma when you have a list of like 3 or more, and it's the comma that goes before the and.
Okay.
You should always use the Oxford comma. When I get confused for being Ezzy Sails, or that I'm not separate from that, kind of like a little bit what we touched on before.
Which you said it didn't exist.
What do you mean?
That you said that you never kind of get that, that people attack you straight for being Ezzy.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean it more like kind of like we were talking about before that, where it's kind of like the name, whether it's like a positive or a negative. Like there was an experience, I think I was like 15 or something, where I was invited. There was an invitational event on Maui that Tristan Boxford was putting on. And I was invited, and there was like a youth competition. It wasn't a World Cup. It was different competition structure. And I was invited to be in the youth side of the event. And then the morning of the event, like I was told that I couldn't compete unless Ezzy Sails sponsored the event. And there were like other riders on brands that were not sponsoring the event. And so then they ended up telling me that I couldn't compete in the event. And so then I wasn't allowed to compete in the event. And that was kind of I don't want to say traumatic experience, but that definitely kind of hit a nerve. So then that's definitely a pet peeve for me.
Yeah. 3 apps you can't live without.
I love it when I don't have my phone with me. I hate having my phone, so I could live without my phone. But the 3 apps I use the most are WhatsApp, Instagram, and the camera.
Yeah. How many times a day do you pee your wetsuit?
I try not to pee my wetsuit.
But you do.
Sometimes you have to, right? Sometimes you're in that thing on the water for 5 hours or something. You just got to do it. But I try not to. I try to do it as little as possible.
Okay. Guilty pleasure.
Ooh, guilty pleasure.
You know what happens all the time? People like say they pee their wetsuit a lot, and then I say guilty pleasure, and they say yes.
Oh, funny. I don't know what my guilty pleasure is. Not that I don't have them, but probably like binge watching something on Netflix or
your top 5
ice cream or something.
Your top 5 windsurfers of all time. Your being the keyword.
I'll stick to wave sailors because I mean there are amazing freestylers and racers, and I have a ton of respect for them. But wave sailing is what I'm focused on. So let me think. So Polikow, Josh Angulo, Cowley, Levi, Brasinho.
There you go. Most underrated windsurfer of all time.
That's such a difficult question because talking about ability versus rating, I think Luke Siver is definitely up there. Luke Siver is amazing, and he's kind of been forgotten by the sport. So I'd probably say Luke Siver.
Yeah, I guess we all saw that massive cheese roll the other day.
Yeah, he's insane. He's such a cool guy as well.
Worst baggage bill or check-in story?
Oof. What's my worst baggage? I've been kind of lucky where I've been in a lot of like situations that seem really bad, but then they all turn out okay. Like in Japan once, coming back from an event there, they didn't want to take my board bag. They said it was too big. And according to the rules, which this is actually, I realized it, according to the rules of most airlines, windsurf board is too big. So even though if they have windsurf board on the list of things that you're allowed to take, often it has a 300-inch linear limit, which means if you add all the dimensions up, it has to be less than, I think it's like 300 inches. And if you've got a board bag, it will never be under that.
Yeah,
and so they
really fits into that.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, according to most rules the rules of most airlines, you're not allowed to take windsurfing gear. And so I had this like battle with them, and we were like cinching the bag down and duct taping it, and I took off as much as I could out of the bag to make it as small as possible, and then they took it. But that was pretty stressful. Otherwise, I think that your attitude influences a lot. So like if you come being really nice and polite, because like the lady or the man behind the counter, they're dealing with people coming up to them and complaining and, having, a kind of a terrible time. And so if you're like friendly, you ask them how they're doing, a lot of times you'll get a pretty good response. And I think the other kind of secret is to know that the person behind the counter can do whatever they want. They can charge you a lot or charge you nothing. There's not really like a fixed rule.
Yeah, I think this is good, but I've also seen situations where it's quite the opposite, where you come up full of confidence, basically telling them what to do.
Yeah.
Of course, not in a rude way, but kind of, and that worked many times. I'm not saying for me, but I have a friend who is like really just like, like on the very walking the line of being, of being rude, and it just works every single time for him. So I wish I had more of this kind of balls to just walk up there and, okay, this is this, you're gonna check in this for 90 euros, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. I try to, just one last thing, I try to look at it kind of like as the total sum. So all the times where I'm friendly and I don't pay, make it okay. Then if, instead of 100 euros, I have to pay 300 euros one time.
Yeah.
Kind of adds up. Fine.
Yeah. Who's your worst competitor?
Worst competitor. I feel like there's no one from the top guys that I haven't ever beat somewhere. I think I've beat everyone from Coster to Brasinier to Victor to, I think everyone. Maybe I haven't beat Thomas anywhere. For a long time, I hadn't beat Bernd Roediger. And so I have a lot of respect for his sailing, and I would always hate it when I'd be in a heat with him on Maui, because I don't know, it just felt like this thing where like I'd never beat him, and like I'd beat Levi, Policao, Brasinho, whatever, but somehow with Bant. But I think in the last event, I think we had a heat together, or maybe 2 years ago, and I beat him. But so for a while it was Bant Roediger.
Yeah.
And then maybe Toma. I don't think I want to be in a heat with Toma anywhere.
Mm-hmm. You get $1 million in cash and you need to spend it in 24 hours. What do you buy?
Ooh. I'd probably invested in like land on Maui.
Yeah. I shouldn't ask people over 30 that, because all down
Yeah.
pretty, Then when you ask like the 18-year-old freestyler, there's a much more like
champagne and strippers.
No, Balt said he wants to dig a hole in like the side of the rock to put a windsurf center there, because there's not enough parking.
Okay.
Where he sails, or something like that.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Last but not least, who do you want to hear on the podcast?
Oh, Rich Page.
He will never come.
Yes, he will. He loves to talk. He's a great talker.
Talk like to us over a beer and whatever, and be really sarcastic.
Did you ask him?
No, I just assumed.
Ask him. Rich has a lot of good stories. So Rich Page, for those who don't know, is the manager of the PWA, and yeah, he's got a lot of
he actually
stories.
came from being like a kind of like a judge, he was kind of pulling anchors at first, and then
he really worked his way up. So before that, he was like career military, like on the path to be like career military. Dropped out of that, you'd have to ask him why, and then started doing like the race, like looking at the on the race crew boat, and then just worked his way up to now running running the whole thing. And so he's seen a lot in windsurfing and has a lot of perspective and interesting stories.
Yeah.
And also like crazy tour stories as well of things that happened in different places, you know, having to get people out of jail or I don't know what else. You
Yeah,
gotta
but that's
ask
the
him.
thing, you know, like it would be ideal once he retires to get him on something.
I
He
think he would talk. I think he would talk. I think he's got some good stories he'd be happy to share.
Okay. Better get to work on that. Thank you, Graham. Definitely a different perspective than most. Yeah, enjoy.
Thanks, Maciek.
Enjoy Denmark.
Thank you.
Yeah, put on the Windsurfing podcast when you're driving up there.
I will. Sounds good. There's a few episodes I've got to catch up on.
Yeah. Cheers. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
So there we go, Graham Ezzy, great podcast from Graham there. But I won't lie, it actually wasn't meant to be Graham this week. It was meant to be Josh Stone, yeah, but he let us down. But he is lined up. We will get him. We've also got Keith DeBull coming. But we're going to take a break. We've had 25. It's been a good run of the podcast. And we're going to come back in the new year with a few backed up. So we don't have the same problems we just had with 2 weeks missing. So we're going to build up a few. And then we're going to release season 2 of the podcast in the new year. But don't worry, we've got plenty more videos coming to the channel. If you want anybody who we've not got on the podcast already, as always, let us know below and we will show them and we'll try and tease them in because it's not that easy, especially the ladies. The ladies are proving difficult. So let us know in the comments below who you want to see. I'll link up there to other podcasts that we've had. We've had some absolute beauties. Maciek himself was a good podcast. So there you go. That is it. Like and subscribe so you don't miss when we're back. And like I say, stay tuned to the channel.